Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Sox on Tap.
Tony, my first reaction is just fuck yes, let's go.
Sox versus the Twins. That's where it all starts. It all starts taking care of business in-house in the Central Division.
That's right, I'm a meatball.
You got to bring that top button swag, baby.
It is always great to beat the Cubs.
And I'm a homer, so I always say they're gonna. Dallas Keuchel Lamson got some beards that you should be afraid of.
What everybody said when he gets out there, it's me versus the other guy, and I'm going to beat him. So I just love that mentality. It's cool and fucking tough.
Steve, would you say that Tony is mad online?
I would definitely say that.
The White Sox winner.
White Sox fans, welcome into the Sox on Tap podcast. It's Johnny Nani, MWI Steve, and Tony Marchese joining you here on Wednesday, February 22nd for Season 4, Episode 120 of Sox on Tap. Gentlemen, how are we doing this fine evening? Hump Day.
We're cracking them, Johnny, and we're here to talk some White Sox baseball. A lot of interesting topics to get here to today, and I see we've got all three of us here. This is awesome. When was the last time we were all here talking White Sox baseball, guys? It had to be at least over a month ago.
Around a month ago. But yeah, it's good to be back. Good to be back. The gang's back together. Steve, how you doing, man?
Doing all right, boys. Listen, spring training, it's here. First game this weekend. We all know I am a big set the tone kind of guy. And I felt like I had to do my part yesterday. I was out doing some corporate functions and corporate after parties and such, hitting the mezcal a little bit hard, trying to set the tone for the spring here. So doing my part, it's not all just, what the team can do for you, but it's what you can do for the team.
I love that take, Steve. We're all about the prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance, right, Tony? You had said that a million times to you, I think.
Absolutely.
And you got to do it. You got to hashtag set the tone. And those shirts that Steve is wearing, excellent looking silver on the black there. You can go ontapsports.bigcartel.com. It's the perfect spring training shirt to get because everyone knows you set the tone for the season down in Glendale, Arizona. But it's great also to support our guy, Tim Anderson, because he, at the top of the lineup, he's the one that has to set the tone. And he's a guy that's topic of much discussion here, guys. I think we should dive right into it because he made some comments today that made people mad online, if you can believe that, on White Sox Twitter.
I can't believe that people would be hashtag mad online on White Sox Twitter. I mean, that never happens. Steve, have you ever seen that before?
In my all part of 5 different decades watching this team and all of now 2 decades on Twitter.com, I have never, ever seen people hashtag mad online before. So this was a first for me.
Guys, very new.
We're not even at spring training games yet. Yes, everyone's there now. Pitchers and catchers obviously reported early, and then position players are all there now. They're doing workouts, drills, shit like that on the field. And then in the meantime, Tim Anderson's going on Chuck Garfine's podcast and talking to him about, he's asking things that he's kind of asked everybody, right? I think he had Lance Lynn on talk about projections and shit like that, but he's asking about, what went wrong last season. Lance is very candid about it. I think Tim Anderson was pretty candid about it too, but the tone in which that he said some of these comments obviously is what riled up the Twitter machine. And it was interesting because when I listened to the whole thing, that's also, I want to just preface this because there's a minute-long clip that kind of had the, I guess, spicy portion of it, you could say. But if you listen to the whole thing, there was more than just that when he talked about what went wrong last season, how things unfolded, all shit like that. So when I listened to the whole thing, I didn't think that too much of it because I think he covered all bases, did it pretty well, expressed himself, how he felt, how the team felt, and then how fans felt too, and acknowledged that. But then in the one clip, it sounded like he was mad at fans for being negative. Steve, resident negativity here. Was this a shot directly at you?
I don't think it was. Admittedly, when I heard the short little soundbite there, I was kind of like, Tim, what the fuck are we doing here? We're, 2 days into camp already, and we're doing this thing where we're getting on the fans for, bullshit from last year. And then, as you mentioned, you go and you actually listen to the rest of the quote, and it was very innocuous, if we're being honest with ourselves. I think the consistent theme that we have seen so far out of camp from these guys, this is Tim and pretty much everybody involved, is they do have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder from how last year went. And I think in some ways it might be a good thing for them. How they go about channeling that is really going to say a lot about where this team is going to go here in 2023. And I'm particularly interested to get out there in a couple 2-3 weeks and see some of these guys firsthand. I'm going to miss obviously a lot of them due to WBC bullshit that's going to be going on, but be interested to get a look at the vibes.
And that's, Steve, I think you put that very well in terms of these guys having a chip on their shoulder this season. It's something that I don't feel like they had at all last year. The lack of desire to win, the lack of TWTW.
Go as far as to say maybe they were, taking on the personality of their half asleep manager.
I think that that's just the most ridiculous, epic bullshit that you will continue to play all season on this show. I thought we were supposed to move forward, Steve. I thought we were supposed to move forward.
I never agreed to that.
Trying to get me
I never agreed to that.
Well, I don't know. I heard Pedro Grifol doesn't like fun, so he's happy Billy Hampton's here. So I don't know. I've seen the guys have a lot of fun down in spring training. I thought Tony La Russa was the guy that was going to kill all the fun, but here we are, Steve. Here we are. I don't know if it's going to play out in their benefit. They might fall flat on their face right out of the gate here. Steve has been talking about this on the show since the schedule was released and sort of the juggernaut that they're going to have to go through early on in the season. But I'd like to see them fired up. I think that's what everybody wants, is just to see them fired up and have, as Steve Shirt says, a tone set early on within spring training, because, these are going to be important games here right out of the gate.
Absolutely. Goes back to set the tone, like you just said there. So it is, I will say there is a little bit of a chip there. We got a comment here. I asked, if you're listening to this, jump in the YouTube or Facebook comments. We can't see the Twitter comments, unfortunately, through here or feature them. But if you're on YouTube, like Matthew Lucas here, he says he didn't hear the whole clip. It sounded like it offended people at this point. Being pissed at fans media gets you juiced. Fuck it. I'll take whatever motivates them, even if it's annoying as shit. I think that's a good take, and whatever it takes for them. And I also didn't, the White Sox have done enough to slap their fans in the face, right? That we could go and list off. There's a whole laundry list of it, right? For shit that went on this offseason. But I didn't even take too much offense to this, though, because, like I said, listen to the whole thing. It's only like 20 minutes long, and you'll understand. Tim Anderson acknowledged that shit went awry last season, and all he was asking for, and I don't even think he was pleading to anybody. He just wants some positive energy around it. I think that's what a fresh start can bring. And that's kind of more of what he was getting at. At least that's the overall theme I took away. Obviously, some certain talking heads didn't agree with that, but makes for the banter that we have here. I will say there was one thing that he worded a little bit weirdly when he said, like, oh, if your wife's having a bad day, you support her, pat her on the back. I think that was just a weird, like, oddly worded thing. I don't know. Just maybe could have used a different terminology, but he's also on the spot. He's fucking
particularly coming from Tim.
Yeah, he's yeah, right. There's that layer to it too. But at the same time, there's also like a, well, why are you? I would have been like, it's like, well, they're your team, right? You're gonna that should be the one that you support at the end of the day. Sure, we can get pissed off at them at certain junctures, but remember, Steve, we had we kind of rip on you for being the it's over guy here, especially last year. But go and turn it back to 2021 when the vibes were good, and there was a lot of positivity surrounding this team. So I think he just wants to return to that. At least that's what I took away from it.
Unfortunately, they're not going to be able to erase what happened last year as much as anybody on that. Yeah, as much as anybody wants to. And I'm sure that there's multiple guys on that ball club. I mean, you heard the Lance Lynn interview too with Chuck, and he talks about beating the projections and not caring about what Zips has to say. And then you get this Tim Anderson clip. I would be hard pressed to think that anybody in camp there, outside of maybe Andrew Benintendi, really was proud of what happened last year. And Benintendi's obviously new to the club, but they're going to have to gel early and try and get past whatever happened last year. And I think it's, it's within Tim Anderson's right to say, he wants those vibes back. I think that the Sox have actually taken a couple of steps with bringing back Elvis Andrus, bringing back Billy Hamilton, guys that have been around the clubhouse, been around these guys before, and bring a little bit more of that. I mean, you look back at the end of last season and there was like one guy playing. That was Elvis Andrus, like professional level baseball. So, hopefully we entered this season and things are more positive. You've seen a little bit more social media, guys having fun and stuff so far early in spring training. And then today's clip, it just felt like, the whole, world fell apart because of a couple of words that were cut into a 1-minute video clip. That was sort of my take on this.
You know what will help to kind of get people to forget about 2022? If you come out and you start like 23-17. Do something like that.
Yep.
That'll erase the negativity.
Winning cures everything. Wild fact.
That's
Big
facts,
news is true.
Hashtag facts only. I mean, like I just go back to the contrast in 2021, both fan kind of experience and morale versus 2022, and polar opposites, right? And Tim wants
That's what happens when you remove Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch products from a stadium.
Well, I agree 100% on that for our purposes there, Tony. But on the like just on how you feel about the team, right? Because it's an everyday grind. It's every day you got to, last year you couldn't escape it. Sure, I know people tried to like tune out or maybe not be as invested, but they're still your team, so you're gonna watch, right? We fucking sat through shit in 2018, a 100-loss season. Granted, that was a different time period in the rebuild. However, they're still your team. Still watched it, right? Still pay attention. So I want those vibes back too, Tim. I think, ruffle some feathers there. I'm along with Matt's comment here that was in here earlier, that whatever it takes, get him juiced up. I'm really okay with it. Any other final thoughts on TA before we move on to the next chapter of this show?
Be the guy at the top of the lineup to set the tone. That's it. Plain and simple.
Nothing more.
Well said.
Nothing more there.
Let's move on. Another story that came out today. Eloy Jimenez. I guess he's on the Lucas Giolito kind of program of slimming down, getting a little more lean. He said that he dropped 25 to 30 pounds this off season, and he wanted to do that. That was something that he was kind of a level he was at in the minors, had success with it. Thought, why not do that here? And that he feels, quicker and faster because of that weight drop. And obviously, I think this indicates, guys, something we've talked about previously on the show, but he's committed and he wants to stick in the outfield. And we have our own feelings about that because we've just seen the injury history and we know the value of his bat in the lineup. However, like Pedro Grifo said, I kind of agree with him here. That's the attitude that you kind of want him to have, though. What is he going to do as a young player like that? Roll over and say that I'm not going to be committed to doing anything I can to help this team. So I think it's interesting. I really hope it doesn't detract from power, though, because I know he does it pretty effortlessly. But I guess that was my first thought. And he says that it's going to make him swing freely. And I don't know if it's going to be an issue. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? That's what kind of first popped in my mind for when we were going to discuss this.
I mean, I still expect Eloy Jimenez to be primarily a DH this season. I don't know if the weight loss is going to subtract from the power. It might actually keep him a little bit healthier throughout this season, get some more plate appearances. Obviously, the whole cliche of showing up to spring training in the best shape of your life is something that we've seen as White Sox fans many, many times. But overall, I think the importance here is you really need Eloy Jimenez in that lineup as many games as you possibly can this season. I don't know if it's going to be as big of a factor in Eloy Jimenez's play overall comparative to, the Lucas Giolito weight loss program. And Steve wrote about that over at On Tap Sportsnet just the other day, but I'm not really too concerned with Eloy's weight. If it does help him, move around the outfield a little bit better, not get injured running to first base, and that so forth, then I think it's a positive development rather than a negative one.
I think, Johnny, kind of getting back to what you talked about, his mindset, and we talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago, Anthony, you and I, when you said that you were concerned that he was going to be playing right field quite a bit. And I said at the time, he's 25 years old. What is he supposed to say? That I'm content to be a full-time DH? But he actually took that and he showed the initiative again to get himself into better playing shape. I think we can all kind of agree that he's a little bit soft physically. He's not, the prototypical, buffed up, like he's not Luis Robert. So in this sense, him getting, slimming down, that could be a thing that maybe helps to decrease some of the soft tissue injuries that we've seen from him so much over the course of the last couple of years. Just, seeming like jogging in the outfield for balls or running down the first base line. Maybe this is the type of thing that's going to help keep him a little more limber, keep him in the lineup more frequently, allowing him to do more damage with the bat. I'm not necessarily concerned either about a decrease in his overall power production as a result of it. He still has a very fluid, easy swing, and I think that power just naturally manifests itself. So I don't think dropping the weight is going to be that much of a hindrance on him from a power standpoint.
Right. And as you bring that point up, Steve, about staying in the lineup more frequently, which obviously we need, given his injury woes of the past and then the importance of this upcoming season. We got a quote from hitting coach Jose Castro, and he says 150 games of Eloy should be good for 30 to 40 home runs. That brings me to a question for you guys. Predictions on how many games Eloy will actually play in. And this can go a number of directions with this. So I'd just like to hear thoughts on this. And
I think, given his injury history, it's pretty safe to say we're going to probably see at least an IL stint or two this season. I mean, it just in baseball in general, it's hard to play 150 games. I'd probably go out on a limb here and say if we do see a really fairly healthy season from Eloy Jimenez, I'm thinking probably around 125 to 130 games out of him. If we get really, really lucky, maybe we get that 150. I'd love to see that, but I'll err on the side of a little bit of caution and kind of put him towards the middle there. 125-ish is sort of what I'm expecting. Steve?
I'm going to go ahead and say he's going to play 152 games through the month of November.
Ooh. I like that. That's bold. That's wow. Was that something positive from Steve there, Tony? I think it might have been.
It was. I'm sort of shocked.
Some positive outlook there. Yeah, I think
I can't even see the shock in your eyes, Anthony.
I'm wearing my shades. You can't see the shock in my eyes.
Steve is obviously impressed with the weight drop there. No, and you're right. That absolutely could be a factor in him being more limber and being able to stay on the field. And obviously, I think there's other factors that go into it, like the usage. And obviously, a guy that we're going to get to later in the show, Oscar Colas, how he performs. Possibly is he going to take over right field? Is he going to be a phenom, come up being a guy who rakes immediately, Tony, like we would love to have, and we see so often other places, but it usually takes longer here for whatever reason. So I think that's a factor to consider there too. I'll go a little bit lower than you guys there. I'll put it over 100. But let's say, what'd you say, Tony, about 125?
Yep.
Knock 5 or 6 off of that. So I'll go right around 120, 119.
Okay. But I think, I would rather side with Steve here, Johnny. Like, I want to see a very dominant Eloy Jimenez.
I want to see it too. You had said probably going to be an IL stint, but given his history, I feel like it's not just a 10-day thing with him. When it happens, it's a, knockout close to like a month or something like that. That's just my gut feeling.
It is. He seems like a guy that is very slow to recover from anything he comes back from. Multiple setback type guy. And let's try and avoid that all season. I hope that the reduced playing time in the outfield, coupled with the being in the best shape of his life, Eloy Jimenez, leads to positive results. There we go. I like that.
Best shape of his life. Best shape of his life. Just like Lucas Giolito, right, Steve? Mm-hmm. You wrote a little ditty about that over at ontapsportsnet.com. Go and check that out if you want to read about another White Sox player who's, employing weight loss as a tool for limberness and staying on the field and improving his play overall. So, all right, let's move on from Eloy and talk about Elvis re-entering the building. Elvis is hashtag back 1 year, $3 million deal. Rick Hahn has already said he's going to play second base. So I like this move, guys. Tony, you and I were talking about it yesterday. Every day that passed, got a little more nervous. I think I bit off a little bit more of my fingernails, but I'm happy he's back. Your guys' reaction to the signing?
I love it. I think that, for all intents and purposes, entering the season with Romy Gonzalez and Lenine Sosa just sort of left something to be desired. I know Steve also went sort of in depth on this over the offseason in a piece he wrote as well about the second base options that the White Sox had internally. I think that, it's a good clubhouse move. He's familiar with the place. He had a resurgent it's not even a second half. So we do have some small sample size stuff to watch out here for, guys. Just to be cautious with this, I don't expect him to perform at the same levels that he did towards the end of last season, but he's an MLB veteran. He's a guy that is, just going to be a professional when he's here. It's going to sort of set the tone for some of these younger options to have to earn their spot if they're going to overtake him. I think competition internally within the team is good. It's a low cost 1 year deal. There's nothing really there that's the White Sox are going to, lose out on per se. If he performs poorly, he's out the door. That's it. So I think this was, for lack of a better term, a good move, but in the end, there's really, really low risk here. And I think his bat is just going to play in that lineup a little bit better, especially at the start of the season, than either of the other two options the White Sox had in camp. So therefore, I'm very happy with this. Steve.
No, I agree. It's a low risk, high reward move. Talked about all offseason trying to diminish as much uncertainty as possible going into the season with, a combination of Romy Gonzalez and Lenine Sosa. There's a lot of uncertainty there because those are unestablished guys at the major league level. So to your point, Anthony, I don't think Elvis Andrus is going to go out there and be the guy that he was for the 2 months that he was here in 2022, but he doesn't need to be. If he can go out and just be a guy that's, a 2 to 2.5 win player, there's a lot of value to that. And this is, again, a well-established big league veteran, knows what it takes to be successful at the major league level. And it just, this is the type of move that smart teams make to go and just round out their roster. Obviously now he's playing a position at second base that he has never played before. But when you look at things on the defensive spectrum, transitioning from shortstop to second base is one of the easier shifts defensively that an infielder can make. But what it also then does is, in the event if Tim has any sort of injury issues here this year, is you have competency that you can then plug in at that shortstop position, and someone that you can trust that has been at this level, played that position for an extended period of time. So it's just a good, sound move for this team. And again, if it doesn't work, it's $3 million. That's $3 million that he who shall not be named doesn't get to be buried with. And that's a good thing.
Well put, Steve. You talking about addressing, needs and doing, filling removing uncertainty. You kind of took the words out of my mouth there. Say proven depth at a position in need. That's the biggest thing that it fills for me. You guys covered all the on-field aspects, and I will just add that I also don't expect him to hit at the same clip that he did when he came here. However, I expect him to bring the same smarts on the base paths and quality defense. And I know he is making a position change, but Steve, you just outlined one of the easier things to do. He's played up the middle his whole life. He was willing to do that. And he even said that last year. Another thing on that, even with all the, kind of crap culture that was around last year, I know there was a little surge after his addition last year, but then they did still fall off, and he was still part of that, ride at the very end. He even then still wanted to return to this team. So that at least tells me that he's a team guy, and he's going to bring some veteran leadership in that regard. Beyond that, for our purposes, guys, I love the Elvis references. There are so many good GIF meme opportunities with Elvis Andrus and Elvis Presley. I fucking love it. I cannot wait to reuse those, recycle ones from last year, and come up with even better ones for this year. Really looking forward to that.
Johnny, I know you're the guy that runs all the social media stuff, and you've got now a whole season worth of Elvis content that you can use. So I knew you were going to be happy with this signing.
Love it. Love it. There's also a kind of byproduct of this, though, and that was initially what we hear from Rick Hahn. He was kind of pumping Romy Gonzalez's tires a little bit, right? Now he does the 180 on it since Elvis is there, says Elvis is going to play second base. That moves Romy Gonzalez, I thought it was interesting terminology, into a Ben Zobrist type of role. So that doesn't just mean he's going to fill in when guys need breaks in the infield. He is going to play some infield like that, but they said possibility using in corner outfield spot. So what do you think you can get from Romy there? And then I guess a follow-up question to that would be, is this the end of Lurie Legend?
I struggle to think that this is going to be the end of the legend on the South Side. To me, he's actually, I think, an ideal spot to be a 26th man on a roster because he can play multiple infield positions. You can plug him in the outfield, even spell in center field should Luis Robert, be ouchy at all. So there is value there. And I've always said that I think Leury was a victim of circumstances in that he was put in positions by his superiors to be overexposed on the diamond frequently. And based off of what Pedro Grifol is saying so far this spring, it doesn't sound as though that is going to be the case. So if you put Leury in the right position, I think he can be fine on this roster, actually. So to me,
2021, perfect example. I think you saw him thrive in certain, in proper usage, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, a guy like, between now Lenyn Sosa or Romy, both of those guys have minor league options available to them. So, and that's okay. And, this now again kind of creates a little bit of competition within some of these pieces on the roster here is, okay, who is going to be the one to ultimately kind of step up and position themselves to make that roster? Because I think, again, just Sosa and Romy, they're not guarantees. And Rick Hahn can talk about the Ben Zobrist role for Romy Gonzalez all he wants. He's got to go out there and he's got to prove it. He wasn't good last year. Granted, it was a small sample size again for him up here at the big league level, but there are some red flags with him, particularly the bat to ball skills. The strikeout to walk ratio was pretty alarming last year, so that is definitely something that needs to be addressed. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he is going to be on the roster. So that'll be something interesting to see play out here over the course of the Cactus League.
I think Steve explained that very well. We don't have much to add there.
We got another comment from Matthew Lucas, and I like this one. He says, I'm hoping the development staff and pro staff have better communication and know how to get the most out of these depth guys. I think that's a key thing there. Communicating what the strengths are. Hey, if he's going to go and tool around in some of the corner outfield spots or whatever it may be down in AAA, that's fine. It's a good place for him to do it. However, get that communication right and be fucking honest with yourselves. Not we're just going to throw him in there because we might have an injury in a pinch and he needs to go there if he's not performing up to the level that he should be or a serviceable major league player at that position. I know that there's been some kind of talk about previous experience at some of that, but it's a whole nother ballgame to do at the big league level. I know they're different body types, different kind of athletes, but look at just the Gavin Sheets, Andrew Vaughn sort of playing out of position shit that we had to deal with over the last couple of years. So I think that's a good comment to bring up there, Matthew. Thank you for that.
And I want to add something to that because that is a really astute point there by Matthew. I've said for a while, one of the criticisms that I've had about this organization from the player development side in particular is that you look at this quote unquote core group right now, all of these highly rated, highly touted prospects, a lot of prospect pedigree. And then we've seen them stall and not really reach their apex here at the big league level. And hopefully now the change in the coaching staff, could potentially look at different ways of doing things, more modern ways of doing things to hopefully improve that and keep these guys progressing and developing at the big league level, because it doesn't just stop the minute that you get to the corner of 35th and Shields. That's what really separates guys from just your replacement level players to your everyday players, to your, all-star players, to your MVP caliber players, is you have to continue that upward progression. And hopefully we start to see some of that now this year.
Well said. Well said. Tony, anything to add on Romy or Elvis or Lurie, any of those guys?
No, I don't have anything to add there, but I do have a question for you guys in terms of this player development and sort of on the same topic. When you talk about guys who are a little more versatile, like a Romy Gonzalez, what do you guys expect to see out of Jake Burger this season? I mean, he's another one of those names where you've got a prospect pedigree here, but he's sort of limited positionally.
You're gonna need him at third base when Yohan inevitably gets injured. That's my answer off the bat. It's gonna happen.
That's fair, but is he just depth here? Is he a trade piece? Is he somebody that's going to see a lot of big league time with the Chicago White Sox outside of just injury replacement for Yohan Moncada? Because, Johnny, I'll say this. If we do get ourselves into that point, and you've got Leury Garcia who can play third base, you've got Romy Gonzalez who can slide over to play third. I've heard it, shouted around that, Elvis Andrus could also slide over there in a pinch. I don't think that I would primarily put any of those guys over Jake Burger, but I see the potential where we're in a stretch where they need another arm to come up and they just sort of deal with it internally versus bringing Jake Burger along. I don't think he's got a really viable path to make this roster out of camp either. And
no, for Jake Burger on that. No, he's starting the year in AAA. But if they both have options, what's the danger in maybe you let Romy, since he's the guy that's there, and they do that, Tony? There's never going to be a pitcher that gets injured. Cold weather shit. It's going to happen. Maybe they, elect to do that and say Yohan has, his off day or whatever, the load management, whatever the hell we're doing with them to try and extend him, whatever may arise there. And you try Romy there and you're still seeing some of those issues like Steve had mentioned there with the strikeout to walk, ratio there. And then what's the danger then in sending him down and calling Jake Burger up for that stint then? You're not getting what you want there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that's a role that Jake Burger can come up like he did early on in the campaign last year when Yohan was still sidelined and maybe show some pop, add some life to the lineup, add a couple extra dingers, right?
He did that very well last season. We even got a comment, Burger's battle find its way into the lineup eventually this season. I'd like to think so as well. He's had that pop. Steve, I'll toss it to you for any thoughts on that.
Yeah, Burger's really in a weird spot as far as with the roster construction here. That's the thing that makes it a little bit challenging. I think he's somebody that really would be very well served to see a lot of action against left-handed pitching in particular. How they're going to go by finding a way to get him those at-bats, though, is ultimately going to be the big question there. I just don't know that there is a really, like you guys were saying, a viable path to him starting with the big league club outside of some injury happening during the course of spring training here, unfortunately. But it just kind of highlights some of the weird pieces of the roster, so to speak, and some of the lack of versatility, with guys like Andrew Vaughn, and then, factoring in, okay, what's going to happen in right field? Is Oscar Colas going to take that position, which then is going to have an impact on your baby boy, Anthony? So there's a lot of different things happening here. Obviously, if Yasmani Grandal can be the consistent everyday catcher, that's going to open up some opportunity potentially for DH at bats. Maybe, again, when a left-handed pitcher is on the mound, if that's where you maybe see Eloy going into one of the corner outfield spots on occasion. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch here for sure.
Right. A lot of factors at play with that. I would guess that, you had talked about, I didn't realize you were saying Jake Burger possibly making opening day roster. I thought it was just kind of, in my mind, foregone conclusion, given the roster construction kind of constraints that Steve had mentioned, that he would start in AAA and then be called upon when there's going to be inevitably an injury or underperformance. That could also be the case. And one of the guys that has options, they can be back down, give Jake Burger his time.
Yeah, Johnny, that's sort of my thought too. I guess I'm just sort of in the whole player development grand scheme of things. Are we past the point where you thought Jake Burger would have grabbed onto a starting role here in Chicago as a former first round draft pick, even despite the injuries that he had? I thought he played well at the big league level last year. The team really, really relied on his bat in the middle of the lineup for a while. It's just, I know that we've gone in circles on this roster construction thing, especially last year, with, all of the first base, third base, corner outfield guys, with even people playing out of position. I'm sort of shocked that he hasn't solidified himself a spot here. And obviously he's blocked by former phenom Yohan Moncada at his natural position. But to me, it's sort of shocking because I would rather have Jake Burger's bat in Chicago than Romy Gonzalez. It just doesn't fit positionally. And with the versatility that a guy like Romy and Garcia offer, they sort of have two of the same sort of guys. Obviously, Lurie can play a little bit of outfield as well, too. But I'm just sort of shocked that we don't have a path for Burger at the moment. And then, we haven't really pulled the trigger on moving him somewhere for anything back. So I was just curious what your guys' thoughts were going into the season. What'll wind up happening with Mr. Burger?
I think you bring up a good point. And on paper, you're talking about a former first-round pick drafted as highly as he was. Sure, you would think that, how is this guy not carved out a roster spot guaranteed, right, by this point? But when you go and look at it subjectively and look at all of his injury history, I know you had kind of discounted those. That was like a 3.5 year setback almost in terms of where he could be on that. And then, we've beat it to death with the roster construction standpoint. But looking at it subjectively, I guess I wouldn't say I'm too shocked that he hasn't. But you're right. For a first-round pick, I think you would have expected that. And if you just gave the hypothetical scenario, player A is not at this level yet, and you would say, what the hell is, going on with this? What's going on with White Sox player development? What's going on with player A? But then when you go and look at it in the unfortunate circumstances that Burger endured, and we had the COVID shit, you lost a minor league season there. So it's really, really tough on that. So I guess I'm not surprised, to answer your question.
Fair enough. What else we got, Johnny?
All right. As we roll on to the end of this show, guys, another kind of up and coming. So let's talk about prospects reaching the bigs here. Oscar Colas. Tony, you and I had a conversation in person last night, and we were talking about Oscar Colas. And I guess my question is for you guys, are we hyped about him? Because I think I've seen both sides of the coin on this one, and I don't know exactly. I want to hear your guys' takes, then I'll give mine after, but it's kind of hard because I feel like I should be more hyped about him. But go ahead.
Johnny, I'm sort of in the same camp as you, and I know we did discuss this a little bit yesterday. I'll pretty much say the exact same thing here. It's really hard for me to get hyped about Oscar Colas, and I don't exactly know why. Part of it, as you and I sort of chatted about, is our focus is at the major league level right now, comparative to where we were just a couple of years ago when we had all sorts of shiny things that we were looking at, grainy highlights of minor league baseball coverage and being really excited to see Eloy Jimenez or Luis Robert or even Yohan Moncada take that next step. Still tuned into the happenings. I'm not as big of a Project Birmingham guy as the guy below me, NWI Steve, is, but it sort of feels like the hype isn't there as much as it was for any of those guys. I know he's sort of catapulted himself up the top 100 prospect rankings. But for what we've seen and sort of that, same topic of player development, it's really hard for me to expect him to come up here and actually be a major impact player, given the circumstances as really none of these guys have. And so it's just, I think it's that track record of what we've seen with, player development and guys coming up. And Johnny, like you said, we like guys who come up and rake immediately. Maybe he'll be the one that proves us wrong, but I just feel like there were shiny objects ahead of him to get really excited about, and you feel a little bit let down by some of those over the past couple of seasons. But I think Steve's going to have a better answer than I'm able to give. He's a little bit more tuned in to, like I said, to the whole Project Birmingham thing. And I know he was down there doing that with the rest of all of the prospects in camp. And I would say outside of Oscar Colas, there's only one other real name in this farm system that I'm really excited about, and that's Colson Montgomery. But I just don't, I guess, have the hype for it. And maybe I'm a little biased because he might come up and steal a lot of playing time from my baby boy. So I'll tune it over to somebody who doesn't have a horse in this race, Steve.
Well, I mean, I have a horse in the race because I want, the White Sox to win baseball games. So there's that. Look, at the end of the day, I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat as both of you, in that having been burnt by other prospects of recent vintage that were of higher pedigree than Oscar Colas is, it's just kind of like take a wait and see approach with it. There are still some concerns with him amongst evaluators about his plate approach and overall plate discipline. He got off to a very torrid start when he arrived in Birmingham last year. And then, some of the strikeout to walk issues that I talked about, earlier with Romy Gonzalez, that kind of happened with Oscar Colas there, but he was kind of making up for that just because when he was connecting with the baseball, he was doing damage with it. So almost, kind of reminiscent maybe of like a left-handed Dion Viciedo. But, so I think that's tank. Yeah. So I think maybe
you got me perked up now. All ears.
I think maybe that's just part of it is like I said, I mean, we've seen, this team have 3 or 4 guys that have been ranked top 30 in all of baseball in terms of overall prospect rankings come up and not make huge impacts right away or do it consistently. So collectively as a fan base, I feel like there is just very much a tempered enthusiasm with him, for lack of a better term.
I think that's a smart approach, Steve. Can you, you're just inherently more tuned into prospect pool than Tony and I are. So can you shed any light on defensively? I know you talked about offense there, and I think that's a good analysis, but defensively, I just haven't heard a whole lot because when we saw the grainy highlights, it was always just him mashing bombs, which is cool and tough. I love that. I love seeing that. And I heard he hit one like 485. That's awesome. However, what's the defense like?
The defense is actually rated out very well. He actually spent some time in Winston-Salem, and even when he got to Birmingham playing center field, I don't feel like he's got the body type that is going to hold up playing center field at the major league level there. But from everything that I have read and from, what I did observe of him last year, I think that is more than a competent right fielder out there. So, the idea of having him and Luis Robert taking up, 2/3 of your outfield, and then obviously Andrew Benintendi, that has the makings of, I think, potentially an above average outfield defense, which is something that we haven't seen in a number of years here at this point. So that is pretty encouraging from that aspect of it here. So if there are struggles at the plate initially with his aggressiveness and overall plate approach, hopefully he doesn't take that out to the field with him and he can still make positive contribution when he's standing in the grass.
What am I even doing here? You just take the thoughts out of my brain and say them there. I was going to say that if there's going to be struggles at the plate, I think any rookie hitter is going to go through slumps, right? Shit, any veteran hitter can too. It happens. It's baseball. It's a long season. But you said taking that out into the field, leaving that in the dugout, being able to still play serviceable defense there, because that overall just adds value then, especially in an area that had been lacking in that position that he is most likely slated to play. So took the words out of my mouth. And I will say, I feel like I'm once again being cautiously kind of approaching this wait and see approach there. But after your analysis there, Steve, I think I am feeling a little bit better about him. So thank you for that.
I think the plate approach comments from Steve there, Johnny, sort of scare me just a little bit. in terms of, I feel like we've seen this movie before in terms of that exact aggressive plate approach that has led to some not so positive results from guys who come up.
Some Luis Robert struggles. Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Right.
But overall, it feels like, we've gone to this car dealer and we've bought this car before. And, we have to take it in for service a lot. Now they're trying to sell us another one. And I'm just like, I don't know if I want to sign this contract. I just don't, because it's so scary. Every single time, it's always got problems.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe we'll be proven wrong. I saw you doing a little praying over there, Johnny.
Right. Yeah. And that was, the hope for, what Steve had kind of mentioned there in all, everything that he kind of outlined there about Oscar Colas. But yeah, I think it's safe to take that approach of the, kind of more wait and see on it. But I also, from a, young player coming up to the show, and a lot of people had said, and obviously I think this was earlier in the offseason, this is before Benintendi and, maybe some of the moves before you knew Eloy slimmed down coming into camp, or that was his intention to fully play in the outfield again. And he's committed to that. I think people were already awarding him the job, and because, the way too early lineup predictions, right, for this team. And everyone said, oh, well, Oscar Colas is going to be your starting right fielder. And so a lot of people all gung-ho on that. And being awarded that role, we've seen guys come up and on opening day be awarded that role in the outfield at both other spots, right? Left field, right field. Can we complete the trifecta? Or excuse me, left field, center field, complete the trifecta here with right field, Oscar Colas there. And like you said, Tony, I think that kind of track record of that is what kind of made me weary of it. So we will just have to wait and see, but I hope the pressure of anything that comes with, playing at the highest level of the game, doesn't affect him too much when struggles inevitably come about. And I hope that the new regime leadership in the dugout is able to help manage that. And then going back to something that Matt in the comments here brought up earlier, the communication between the development staff and then the pro staff. How do we best handle this? He did a lot of raking, a lot of mashing last year throughout various levels of the minor leagues, but can they take anything away from when there was maybe a struggle? Maybe there was a time of a little bit too much chase. Maybe there was a little bit too much time of too many strikeouts and all of that. Can we apply any of that to maybe help calm him down, not feel like the world's burning down if he goes on a, week-long streak where he's, hitting like, in the hundreds, right? That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a good thing if this staff was able to provide not just Oscar Colas, but the rest of this roster with the tools to help them better understand how guys are approaching them when they get in the batter's box. And that's, some of the things that they've talked about a little bit here this spring and in the lead up to camp assembling there was some of the new data and some of the new information that is being shared with the hitters. And hopefully that will help to alleviate some of those issues, particularly for a guy like Oscar Colas, who is going to be getting his first taste of major league pitching here. So that is also going to be another interesting storyline to watch here this season, to see and hope maybe, just maybe, the White Sox finally have a good quality, competent coaching staff.
One can only hope. All right, guys, as we're winding down this episode, season 4, episode 120 of the Sox on Tap podcast, we thank all of our listeners for tuning in here along with YouTube, Facebook, on Twitter if you're there too. But remember, we can't see the comments if you post them in Twitter. We appreciate you viewing there. But if you want to featured on here on the show, go to youtube.com/OnTapSportsNet. Hit the alert button so you know when we go live. Jump in the comments. Love to talk White Sox with all of you. Let's wind it down with the last few fun notes. Any nuggets that you've seen from spring training? Luis Robert Jr. Now, guys, does the junior add any other extra, oomph to his game?
I think it's just going to be really interesting to see how Steve handles the R roles and then adds a junior this season.
We're going to be so out of breath.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see if he rolls the R on the junior at the end. So we'll have to wait for Luis Robert to hit a home run. Luis Robert Jr. to hit a home run before we can figure that one out. But I'm really curious to see how Steve's going to handle that this year. And I do think it might add a little bit of to his game. I'm also curious to see if the jerseys change.
Oh, they will. I mean, did you see the photos that they
Yeah.
posted today? And
I did not. They
the
have
tweet
Junior on the back.
quite
Yep.
literally said Luis Robert Jr. and it was just Luis Robert standing there, but it was from the back and Robert Jr. 88.
Okay, so vintage jerseys
So,
from Luis Robert. You've got a Robert jersey, don't you?
I do. It's the OG Luis Robert. And it's in Steve's favorite one, you know, the softball uniforms.
Make me fucking sick.
Hey, at least I'm not wearing pinstripe pants when I wear it. I think it looks good for a fan attire in that regard, Steve, because I do think the pants are a little bit off there, but that's neither here nor there. With this, Tony, I'm worried that I'm going to, in our articles at OnTap Sportsnet, as the editor over there, I'm going to screw up and forget the junior within that text more often than Luis Robert's going to hit the ball over the fence this year. That's what I'm concerned about.
Ooh. We'll have to fix that. We got to change a bunch of stuff on the website now. Look at that. You just created a bunch of work.
Right. That's just where I was at with that. Also, another thing I thought it was funny. They always wear the white jersey. I know that's just kind of their standard. Everyone does that with their standard home jerseys for like these photo ops and the media day. That's what they're doing down there. And of course, they take all the promo pictures so they can show them up on the scoreboard. How many times are they actually going to wear the fucking white jerseys this year? They're going to do that only to wear them like 30 times at home max, if that.
Maybe they should wear those a little bit more. Jay Kuda did the uniform tracker last season. I'm not exactly sure where they wound up in terms of record with those things, but I'd like to see the whites out a little bit more.
I think they were inflated though, because if you remember, was that at the beginning of the season? They still had a supply chain issue. So I remember going on a Sunday in April and they weren't wearing 83s and people were wondering, did they retire the 83s? But no, it was just a supply chain thing. So each team only had basically 2 jerseys to start the year. So that was inflated. And I don't think it's the worst thing because I honestly, if we're going to wear pinstripes, I'd rather have the vests. I'm in that camp. Bring those babies back. However, I think the black looks good. Black with the white pants looks good. That's probably my I love the script on the gray jerseys too, but the all gray can kind of, you know, you maybe get a little tedious if you're on a road trip seeing that day after day. I like the blacks.
The only, my biggest complaint with the gray jersey is the patch on the sleeve that has just the regular logo on it when they did away with the diamond sock.
Right.
That's just not right. That's a situation that needs to be rectified immediately.
I would agree with Steve here. Yes, absolutely.
Because the setup was, the black jerseys, obviously I know they have this logo, the standard Gothic logo on the chest. So then they use the diamond logo, which looks great. That's part of why I like the black jerseys a lot. But it was sweet when they just had that same setup, but on gray, because the script looks good too. The iconic, kind of Chicago script that is similar to the Bulls, and kind of their, 80s kind of look there too. So I don't know. That's a little uniform talk, a little banter. Huh? I'm a uniform nerd, so I had to air that shit out. Any other fun shit that you guys have seen from spring training, maybe a little more lighthearted? I think we've dove into all the pertinent topics on field shit here. But last call here.
Just every day kind of getting that update on twatter.com to see who's riding in the go-karts together, really monitoring this situation. So again, it's going to be something fascinating for me when I get out there in a couple of weeks, lay eyes on it a little bit, see who's riding with who's rolling together out there, creating that camaraderie and that bond. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Steve, so you just mentioned that. When are you going out there? Give the listeners, and make sure you're following at NWI_Steve on Twitter and at Sox on Tap so you can get these updates. But Steve, when are you going to be out there so people can know when to expect the content?
I will be
confirm things in person.
Yeah, I will be making my return to the desert on Sunday, March the 12th. So I will be in attendance for the game that afternoon. Naturally, the team has an off day the following day, so I'm going to go take in some international exhibition play at Chase Field there, and then right back on the horse with the Sox then through Thursday of that week. So going to be a nice little week out there in the sun. Have a couple 2-treat pops. Go get wild and out in the streets of Scottsdale. See what happens.
Love it. Love to see it. Wish we could make the trek down there too, Tony. But final thoughts, wrap it up here. Last call on this early spring training edition.
Don't have much here for you, Johnny, but I agree with Steve. The go-kart situation down in Arizona right now is something that I've had my eyes on as well. Saw Lance Lynn behind the wheel. couple 2-3 times. He's looking
We-
mighty fine driving around the go-karts.
The
TA
AI does some great shit, Tony, like you had mentioned last night. Not to reveal it, but we need him in the ZZ Top music video driving one of the cars.
Yes. We'll see what we can make happen here. But it's Fear the Beard season is back. So I'm happy that we are here. I'm anxiously awaiting spring training overreactor season. That's sort of my final thought. Don't know when that's going to start happening.
I can tell you when.
I've been patiently waiting spring training overreactor season.
Here's ultimately what it comes down to, and this is going to be my parting thoughts for the evening for our listeners. Sunday is the biggest game of Pedro Griffol's life. He has to go out there and hashtag set the tone for the season. They've been talking about this all week. You can't win a division title. You can't lose it, or you can't win a division title in the spring, but you sure as hell can lose it. We saw that last year, going out there, lax attitude. So I want to see them go out there Sunday. When I get off that plane in San Jose, California, I'm going to be tuning in. I'm going to use whatever technology I have at my disposal to get this game in front of me. And I want to see what kind of lineup Pedro Grifol is putting together on that field, because that is a must win, baby.
Absolutely. I think that's a great note to send out on. Steve, show the people that shirt once again. I want to let them know. On Tap Sports.
Set the tone, baby.
Got to set the tone, as Steve just outlined the importance of. OnTapSports.BigCartel.com. Go and get yourself a shirt, set the tone for the season with us here at Sox on Tap. We appreciate all of our listeners for tuning in here. Tony, hit it. Until next time, White Sox forever.
White Sox forever.
White Sox for life.